Okay, now BIM is a business process. It's not technology. It's a business process which enables people to share data when they need it, wherever they are. That's all BIM is in very simple terms. And it all starts with data. And recently, I received this, which is a string of letters and numbers and totally meaningless, even when it was attached to a boarding pass from SAS flight. It was still a little bit meaningless. So I thought I'd try and break that down. So breaking it down, it started to make sense, as you can see. So this is that string of data, and now it's got an explanation to it. So the data, the raw data, basically, you apply some rules, you configure it, and you create information. So when people talk about data, and you think, oh, what does data mean? It's actually the information that we're after. Now, with machine-to-machine communication, data is seamless. But how many times do you receive information or data that hasn't been configured and is a little bit meaningless? So we've got to understand straight away that we've got to actually apply some rules to this data. But we have to go further, because if I'm going to make a successful visit on that flight, I need to do these things. I need to arrange where I'm going. What am I going to do? Where am I going to get value out of this? In other words, I want to create that information into knowledge, because knowledge is what we apply. So raw data is meaningless unless we apply a few rules to it or configure it. But what we're really after is to turn that information with some skills and research, and that's why we need people in this industry. That's why technology will never take over. We need skills to be applied to data and to information before it becomes knowledge. And it's the knowledge that we need to take our work forward. There's actually one further stage, and that is if we learn from the knowledge, then we're creating wisdom. Now that's a fairly old way of looking at data, but that has not changed since I first presented that 20 years ago at a university in the early 80s. Nothing's changed, apart from the technology that we use. So data is the starting point for everything. Okay, now, I've got to say a little bit about my company, because I'm going to express a few opinions of data, and it's only right that you understand where the authority for these opinions come from. So this is not sales slides at all, but BIMobject have opinions purely and simply because actually it says 940,000 registered users. That was October. This weekend we reached 1 million registered professional users of our services. So we listen to them. Our whole business model is based upon what our users want and what our clients want. So when I give an opinion, I'm giving that opinion based upon the opinions of a global market leader. So hopefully it'll have a little bit more sense. So what do we do at BIMobject? Some of you may know, in fact there's one or two names I've seen on the list which are clients of BIMobject. If you don't know, it's quite simple. Just go BIMobject.com or BIM.com, a little site we acquired recently, and it will tell you, and you're about to see it. It's free. You don't have to pay for it. You can have all the data that you want out of there for nothing. But what is that data? We create and host intelligent versions of real building products in the cloud. Now, when I say a building product, it could be a chair, it could be a door, it could be a system like air conditioning in a building, or the plumbing system. It could be a wall, which is a system, or of course it could be a roof, which is a system. To us, it's all single objects. It's just the way that these objects are put together. It could actually be a whole building, as you'll see in a later example. We do this in the cloud, and there are 3 clouds that we have. The public-facing one, which anybody can go onto, that's the BIMobject.com. We also have clouds that we create for specific manufacturers who don't want to do this in their own environment. They don't want to go through the stress of doing this. So we provide the web service that gives them that cloud on their own site. And we also do private or hidden sites, mainly for government departments, such as the Ministry of Justice, for enforcement agencies, where data has to be very controlled in the way it's distributed. But we see data in construction in a very simple way, and I'm delighted to say that today there's a few people that have been talking about DFMA, they've been talking about digitisation of the industry. We consider that construction is simply, at its basic level, an assembly of components to produce a finished product, and that product produces a finished outcome. The only thing unique about this is the location. Apart from that, it's assembly. So if we look at data in construction, bearing in mind that we get this data, we've got to configure it, there are three elements that our clients have said are important. The first one is geometry. If you're working in this BIM environment, everybody will know that it's all about what you see. It's very visual. So the first element of the data is geometry. We have to have a visualization of what the product or system is. The second area is properties. Steve spoke about property sets. We need to be able to attach data in layers to the geometry. So the geometry could be a chair, but that chair, of course, has a dimension, which we can find from the geometry. It has a weight. It has a supply. It has a fire rating. It has a purpose. And these are all different layers of data which we can add in. So that's the second level that we need to do in construction to turn data into usable information which we can apply as knowledge. And the third one is the source, the reliability of that data. Data that can be corrupted, data that can be changed, has no value whatsoever. So we need to create data and distribute data as a single source of truth. You may have come across the phrase single source of truth. And all we mean by that is that once the data has been created in this BIM environment, it can only be changed by the person who owns that data. If anybody down the line changes the data, which happens quite commonly in construction, you need to be able to identify who has made that change so that you can correct it. So those are the three areas that our clients tell us are critically important when we are configuring data in the construction environment. What they've also said is, well, we're suppliers. Now, a supplier, I say, could be a manufacturer of a component. It could be a tile, it could be a complete system in your case. But whoever is providing it, they've said if we're going to work in this environment, the core thing we want to do is to increase the number of products or services that we provide to industry. It's a commercial reason. If you're not going to get commercial gain from it, there's a very difficult argument as to why you should do it. So how can this be achieved in the digital environment? Well, the first one is obvious, wide exposure of products and services. The more people who see them, the more people are likely to use them. But you've got to be able to direct it to the clients who want them in a format that the clients want. It's got to be usable data. And it has to be via an environment that is simple to access. You need control of the data that you're putting into industry, so it's not corrupted. And finally, you need knowledge of who is accessing your data and when. That is the commercial gain of correct data management. If you can find out who is downloading the information on your services, then you've got, or your sales and commercial people have got a direct contact with a potential client. And obviously you need an easy way to communicate with users. So that, from the supplier side, is what our clients tell us that they want to do. Now, from the user side, the actual clients of your services, what do they want? They want to be able to control the project content in a secure environment. So, let's see, how do they do that? Well, first of all, they've got to be able to define the content in a consistent data format, via a simple environment, controlling the data. These are fairly, you've just seen these on a different slide, with an easy way to communicate to partners. So basically, are there any similarities between what the suppliers want to do and what the clients want to do? And if we overlap them, all of those areas in red are the same. So basically, if we have defined the data in the right way and distributing the data in the right way, there is a huge amount of similarity between what the supplier needs and what the client needs. And this is what our user base and this is what our clients have said. We need to find the synergy between these two areas, and then we have a very good commercial driver to integrate into this building information modelling process. So, if we can do this, would it be useful? The answer is yes. That has driven our business model. That's what we're trying to achieve for our clients. We call it a platform as a service. And I'd just like to give an example, just to finish, because, again, I'm conscious of the time. I'll give an example of a platform as a service. So this is how some of the private clients are using it. And the slides that I've been allowed to use here come from the Ministry of Justice, who are, as you know, a major investor in the industry. First of all, we defined and agreed with them what the content management areas were of importance. And the most important thing to them was security. They do not want their data being available to anybody except the people they are directing that data to. They want single source of truth so that they can actually control the accuracy of the data and the non-corruptibility of that data. They want to be able to change the data fairly easily, so they want geometry with lots of separate data sheets so that they can change those data sheets very, very easily. They want to be able to track who's accessing the data, who's accessing it when and where and what they're using it for. They want to be able to have simple version control, so again they can communicate with their clients if there's any changes. They want to be able to create geometry fairly easily. And they want the flexibility to be able to adjust any of these elements as and when their business model changes. So that is the brief that the Ministry of Justice gave to us as an organisation. We use a product called Hercules, which is configurable, and this is how it was applied as a platform of a service with single source of truth in a cloud-based environment for the Ministry of Justice. Now, it may surprise you to know that in the Ministry of Justice, if you take their entire estate, they can define all of the objects and systems that they use in courtrooms, in prisons, in about 2,000 separate individual items. So that basically is their whole object library. Their library of requirement is around about 2,000. Obviously, you can see some of the things in there. Fairly simple things like chairs, doors, screens, but it also goes into more complex areas such as security systems, cell doors, air conditioning, kitchen supply. So it's quite extensive. So the first thing that they wanted to do was to create a library of components. And this, as you can see, is a chair. If you do go on, or if you've been onto the BIMobject cloud, you'll be able to click on things like this and find out how you can use it, how you can access it. So I'm not going to go through that in detail. But basically, from a library component, the Ministry of Justice said then, well, when we're building a prison or when we're building a courthouse, we use standard layouts of rooms. So, for example, in a prison, there's only 3 types of cell. There's a left-facing cell, a right-facing cell, and a disabled cell. So there's only 3 configurations of cells. So this particular client said, okay, let's make those configurations a single object. So here, we're going to look at one single object. This is a hearing room in a court. And this is replicated over the entire estate. But basically, there's a 3D representation of it. But what they wanted to be able to do, when they issued this to their supply chains, is basically say, okay, here's the design, here's a collaborative environment, you can play around with these products, and if you want to interrogate any product in there, you can simply select it, and you can go back to its source data, which in this case is the chair. So it starts with a library, through to a configuration, back to the individual components, which enables them, there's lots of other sexy things they can do. They can produce costed bills and materials out of this. They can use it as a collaborative environment. They can do product changes on the fly. They can notify changes down the system. But basically, that gives them all the flexibility they need. The next thing they wanted, and this is the last thing I'll show you, is that they said, well, you know, we've got to start and look at other things. So we're not just looking at a room. Can we do this for a building? And so, that is a complete courthouse, which to them now is a single product which can be broken down into its component parts. So what they're doing at the MOJ and what clients are doing is defining their data requirements And all that we do as an organisation is to help them configure that data so that it becomes information that people can apply their skills to turn the information into knowledge, which can integrate into the building information environment, which enables them to put the ticks in the boxes. But the critical thing here, and Damien asked me earlier if I'd do a little 2-minute soundbite. My background is not construction. My background is manufacturing, automotive, aerospace. In 1980, the manufacturing industry in Western Europe was under threat because we were getting in. Does anybody remember Datsun cars and the early Skodas? Yeah. How did we respond to it when these cheap products came into the UK? How did we respond to it? Excuse my French, they were crap, weren't they? You can't expect the quality that we manufacture in the UK to be matched by this bunch of rubbish coming in from the Far East. The truth was that it was just as good, in many cases better, and it was 2/3 or half the price. So we had a huge pressure on lowering prices, and the only way that manufacturing could do that was to change the way that it worked. And hence the decade of the 1980s in manufacturing was the decade of integrated process. That's BIM. They realised that they had to start and work differently. They had to start now to use data in a different way. And quite simply, I went through that decade, and over that 10-year period, there were only 2 types of company. There were the ones who adopted digital technology and integrated process, and those that didn't. By 1990, those that didn't no longer existed. So this is not a threat to the industry, but we've been talking about change today. If this industry does not digitise, there will be casualties for those who don't do it. So if you're doing this BIM stuff or this integrated process stuff, great. If you're not, please do. I'd hate to be here in 10 years' time. Well, I've been retired in 10 years' time, but I hate to have a colleague in 10 years' time standing up and this room's half empty because half the companies have gone. That would be a tragedy. That's all I've got to say. Thank you very much indeed.